Hello, everyone. Just a quick word from us here at Yarn Inspirations. Thank you for joining us on this wonderful Tuesday evening for a Michael's virtual classroom. Welcome to February. My name is Bianca from yarnspirations.com, and I'm here with your host today, Tamara Kelly from Moogly blog. And this evening, Tamara's going to be teaching us basic crochet skills that you can use in a variety of projects. I will be in the chat helping you answer any questions you might have. So feel free to put any questions that pop into your mind in the chat and we'll get those answered for you. With that all being said, I will pass it over to Tamara to get started.
Okay, hi everybody. As she was saying, I'm Tamara Kelly from Moogly. And the other thing I want to repeat that they've just said is that this class is being recorded. We only have an hour together tonight, and learning how to crochet, generally speaking, takes longer than an hour. So if you already know how to knit, you might pick up these stitches really quickly. If this is your first time trying to crochet or knit or use yarn, it might take you a little longer. So it's okay to just work on the first couple of skills I'm going to show you tonight and keep practicing those. Then you can return to this recording when you're ready to move on to that next step. When I first learned to crochet, I spent a really long time just working on my slip knot and my chaining before I was ready to move on to single crochet. So I'm going to show you all those things tonight so that you've got them in the recording. And if you are somebody who already knows how to knit or you've got some basics and you're just doing a refresher, you might be able to follow along. But for everybody else, if this is your first time learning how to crochet, please don't get overwhelmed. Don't feel like this is too much. There's some really basic things that we start out with. I'm going to go past that tonight, and you can just keep practicing those really basic things while you follow along and watch tonight. So with all that said, let's go ahead and I'll bring on my hand camera here, and we'll start out by taking a look at our ball of yarn and hook. Alrighty, so on your class listing tonight, it was recommended that you have this particular yarn. If you don't, if you're practicing with a different yarn tonight, of course, that's okay. But the main thing is you want it to be something kind of smooth like this. As an, to show you the difference, this would be something really fuzzy. If you've got a really fuzzy or highly textured yarn, it can be really difficult to see your stitches. So when you're learning to crochet, it's always a good idea to have a really nice smooth yarn like this, where basically you can see the strand itself. So when you go ahead and pick out your yarn, you'll also, of course, need a crochet hook. So this is what a crochet hook looks like if you haven't used one before. This is your handle. This right here down at the end, of course, is the actual hook that you do to grab things with. And the other thing I want to point out is, let's see if I can get it to focus here on our camera. There is a size for each crochet hook. So this one says USL 11 8mm. I know it's a little shiny there on camera. It's a little easier to see in person. This one happens to be by Susan Bates. But that millimeter, that's the most important part for your crochet hooks. That's going to tell you what size crochet hook you have. And you want to basically pair the crochet hook with the yarn because, as you can see here with just these two examples, yarn comes in some very different thicknesses. So when we turn over our yarn label here, there's all these little blocks of information that can have really important things for you to know. So the first thing is this little skein symbol. You can see how it kind of looks like a ball of yarn right there, and it says super bulky, and it has a 6 on it. This tells us how thick the yarn is. So if you have a very thin yarn, like a thread, it's going to have a 0 or a 1 on it, and the higher the number, the thicker the yarn. Then coming over here, we've got these two little boxes right here. And let's see, get that really close right there. If you look right in the middle of those boxes, you see one looks like it has knitting needles and the other one looks like it has a crochet hook. So tonight we're talking about crochet. So that's the one we want to look at. And if you look right there at the top, I know it's teeny tiny, it says 8mm, and right underneath it says USL 11. So that means while you don't have to use that size of crochet hook with this yarn, it's a great starting point. It's going to give you sort of a medium weight of fabric that you crochet. So again, that happens to be the size hook that we've got right here. There's also, of course, lots of other information on the yarn label that's always good to know and important. You'll find your washing and carrying instructions and what the yarn is made of, and just how much yarn is in each skein. Every time you try pick up a different kind of yarn, those numbers are going to be different. It's going to have different ounces, different grams, and different yards. So if you enjoy crocheting tonight, and you want to make a project someday, and you want to make a project that requires a certain amount of yarn, you'll want to look for that on your yarn label. So once you've got your yarn, of course, then we pull off that label and start looking for the end. And luckily for me, mine's right here. So go ahead and take a minute and find the end of your yarn. And after you've found the end of it, go ahead and pull up just a couple yards so that we've got some yarn here to work with. So I'm just going to give you everybody a minute to take some time and set up some yarn here so you can find the end of your yarn. Okay. Oh, this was a question somebody just popped up while we find the end of our yarn here. I managed to misplace my label already, so let me pull up the next. Luckily, I had a spare here. Somebody asked about dye lot. Dye lot is something you'll find usually right in this section of the label, and every yarn seems to have it a little different. I really wish I could find that original label that I've managed to misplace already. But you want to look for the numbers on your labels and just try and make sure that they match. So you'll have some numbers there, you'll have some numbers there, and you want to match those. Like if you've got a project that has multiple skeins of the same color, you want to match your dye lots to make sure all your greens are the same green and all your grays are the same gray. So that's a little bit more when you get into crocheting and you're making multi-skein projects, but just check those numbers in that section on your skein for dye lot. So let's see. If you found the end of your yarn, then the first thing we need to do to get started crocheting is make a slip knot. I'm going to be demonstrating it here in this yarn, our main yarn, but first I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate it in this fuzzy yarn because it allows me to show it just a little bit bigger here. And I think it's just a little bit easier to see on camera. And then I will go ahead and go back to doing it in our other yarn. But before I get started with that, were there any other questions I could answer on the label or hook?
Tamara, I think we do have some questions
Mm-hmm.
just around. It seems like we have some left-handed stitchers in the class. So are you going to be able to kind of show us how to stitch left-handed, or does that matter?
Well, I can do some of it left-handed, but I am not left-handed myself. I am a right-handed crocheter, and while I wish I was ambidextrous, unfortunately, I'm not. So I can do some of the things left-handed, but really only the very basics. I will say on my YouTube channel, I do have left-handed video tutorials for the basic stitches. So hopefully we'll be able to get the left-handers at least through chaining tonight. And then if you want to see left-handed video tutorials for the specific stitches, you'll be able to find those on YouTube as well. So I apologize. I wish I was more ambidextrous. That would be awesome, but alas, I can only do so much. All right. So let's go ahead and that was a really good question too. Somebody asked, is there a recommended way to pull yarn from the skein? I always prefer to start from the outside. There are a few yarns that specifically tell you to pull from the inside, but most yarn balls are not designed that way. Most yarn balls are designed to be pulled from the outside. So that's what I always like to do there. Okay, so let's go ahead and work on that slip knot. I've got the end of my yarn here, and you're going to want to come in about 6 to 10 inches or so. The thicker the yarn, the further you'll need to come in. But we just want to have our knot in a little ways so that it doesn't pull back out. So we come in several inches into our yarn, and we're just going to make a loop in it, just like that. If I pull the end up here, you can see it kind of looks like one of those awareness ribbons that were so popular a few years ago. So let's do that again. We've just got our end of our yarn here. We're going to come in about a foot or so, however, a few inches, whatever you like, and just make a loop, just like that. So there's our end. This end's still attached to our skein. Then we are going to take this little tail end and just slide it right behind that loop, or right underneath. Okay, so let's pull that apart again. We've got our little loop here. Here's the tail end of our yarn. And we just put that right underneath the loop we made. Okay. After we do that, then we want to take our fingers and we're just going to pinch that yarn that was right there through the loop And then we've got these two ends, and we can use our other hand to pull down on those ends. At the same time, we sort of pull up on that loop, and that creates a slip knot. Great thing about a slip knot is if we don't like it, it's in the wrong spot, we've changed our mind, you can pull on those ends, and it all just comes right back out. With smoother yarn, you don't have to pull quite as hard as I do with this stuff, but let's demo that one more time here. At the end of my yarn, I'm going to come in a ways and just make a loop. Okay. Got the end of my yarn there, and it's going over the end that's attached to the skein. Then I want to put that end right behind the loop, and then I can grab, just go right into the center of that circle there and pull up on that loop and sort of hold down on those ends there, and that makes a slip knot. Okay, does anybody need to see that again before I do it in the thinner yarn? Okay, looks like we might be good there. So let's go ahead and set this one aside. Now I'm going to go ahead and bring in the yarn we're using. Okay, so we're going to do it again in the thinner yarn. So we'll see it again right here. Now, this stuff's not quite as thick, so I don't need to come in quite as far, but I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to make a loop just like that. Okay. Then I put that end, oops, right behind our loop. There we are. Trying to keep it all on camera. Then I just reach right into that circle. I'm going to grab that little part right there. And then we grab the end attached to the skein and the tail and pull down on those while we pull up on the knot. And you can see this knot's a lot smaller and it's about the right size for my hook. But if your knot turns out really big or really small, you can just pull on those ends a little bit to adjust it, to make it smaller, and then to make it bigger. You can pull up on the knot itself to make that loop bigger. And if you don't like it at all, you just pull on the end and it goes away. So let's do that one more time here before we move on to our next skill. We've got the end of our yarn. We come in a good 6 to 10 inches or so. We're just going to make a loop in our yarn like that. Then we want to put that end under that loop. Then we can grab, we're going to use our fingers to grab that little space of yarn right there inside the loop. And at the same time, pull down on those ends to create our slip knot. Okay, so now if I were left-handed, this part at least I can do left-handed, I think. We'll find out. I'm going to come in from this end, make my loop, pull that tail end under the loop. Sorry, obviously not left-handed, but doing it from the other side at least. There we are. And then reach in there and grab that loop right there and pull it up through the circle while we pull down on the ends. So the same thing for the slip knot. You can make it from either side. We just want to, now I'll switch mine back here. Find our end, come in a good ways, make our loop, and you can make it as big or as small as you like, whatever's easy, whatever's comfortable for you. Slide that end behind the loop, then reach in and grab it and pull up on that while you pull down on the ends there. And of course, you know, if it gets wonky, if you don't like it, you can just pull on that end and pull it right back out. So before we move on to chaining, were there any other questions on the slip knot?
John is wondering, is there any particular reason why you're pulling the tail through rather than pulling kind of the end that's attached to the rest of the ball?
That's a great question, and there may be a reason in the realm of physics and knot tying. For me, I'm going to say that's simply the way I learned to make a slip knot. And as far as I know, that's how you make a slip knot. You'd have to ask somebody who was more into knot tying and all those fancy knots. They'd probably have a really good reason for it. I just know that this is the way that we make slip knots for crochet and knitting. So I'm sorry I don't have a better answer for you there. I never did take physics in high school. So, all right. So once we've got the slip knot made, then it's time to finally pick up our hook. And when you pick up your hook, there's a lot of different ways you can do that. And no, there's no right way and there's no wrong way. You can really hold your hook however it's comfortable for you. So this is what's called sort of the knife hold most often. It's sort of an overhand hold. You can see I literally just grabbed right onto my hook. Left-handed, same thing, just grab right onto your hook. That's really popular. Also, holding it like this, sort of like a pencil. Some people like to hold it up on the handle. Some people really like to hold it down on basically what are these finger grips where the label is. All of these things are right. Somewhere in between is right. Some people, people do all kinds of different things. I've even seen people who crochet with their feet. So it's going to feel awkward at first, especially if you've never crocheted or knitted before. Holding a tool to do in either of these ways may feel awkward for you, and it's going to take some getting used to. It certainly did for me. So as you're getting started, go ahead and switch back and forth. Try different ways to grip your hook. Hold it however feels best for you. Now, that is what you should be holding in your right hand if you're right-handed, if you're left-handed, if you're left-handed. Now, we also need to hold on to the yarn. So I'm going to go ahead and put this little slip knot right on my hook. And when I do that, I want to make sure that that tail end is facing me. So you can kind of see with our knot here, how it's sort of, there's the tail ends on one side and the end attached to the skein is on the other. I want to slip it on so that the tail end is facing me. This is just going to help our stitches lay better. Once you've got it on your hook, we can tighten that knot up, but we don't want it super tight. Let me show you what that looks like. Here, that's way too tight. When I go to make stitches, I'm going to have a hard time pulling my hook back and forth through that loop, let alone getting into it again. I want to leave just a little bit of daylight there. So you can see right there, if I hold it at just the right angle, you can see the table there through that loop. So it's not twice as big as the hook or anything like that, but there's just a little bit of room in there to move. So you can go ahead and take your time and pull up on your hook, adjust the size of your knot a little bit, get it to where you feel comfortable. And this is something that, like the other skills, is going to take some practice. It is very, very normal when you're learning to crochet and when you learn how to chain, which is what we're doing next, to make these chains really tightly. It takes practice to get your tension right, and just to get your tension where it wants to be, to get your hands used to the movements. So go ahead and just make sure there's a little bit of space in there right now, but don't worry if you find as you keep practicing that your chains, get a little tight sometimes, get a little loose sometimes. That's just something that comes with practice. So then when we've got our yarn on our hook and our hook in our hand, we need to do something with the other hand. And with the other hand, we do what's called tensioning the yarn. And again, there's even more ways to do this than there are to hold the yarn. Some people really like to weave it between their fingers. This creates a lot of tension on their yarn, and that's something that can be really helpful, especially when you're first learning to crochet. Some people, like myself, I just put it right over my first finger usually. That tends to keep it really loose, but then I can squeeze my fingers together when I want to sort of create that tension and have a little more tension against my hook. So it's however you like to hold the yarn in that hand. Again, this is something you'll need to experiment with to find the best way for you because everybody does it a little differently. Going back to feet, I've seen somebody who tensions it right through their toes and both their hands worked. So it's whatever works for you. So I'm going to go ahead and sort of get my yarn in my hand here and on my hook. And then what we're going to be doing is chaining. And I want to show you what that looks like when you encounter it in a crochet pattern. When you follow a crochet pattern, usually at the beginning of the crochet pattern, once you get to the actual instructions, your first instruction is going to be CH and then a number. That CH is the abbreviation for chain. So the instructions won't tell you to make the slip knot. That's sort of implied. You have to know that part on your own. But then once you start the pattern, you're going to see CH 9 times out of 10. Otherwise, it's probably a little bit more advanced pattern. So chaining is when we basically create a long series of loops using our hook. Then we can work back into those loops to create stitches and build up our crochet fabric. So to begin, what we want to do, I like to put a little extra tension here on my tail end too. And like I say, this is going to feel really awkward at first, and it's okay if it does, and it's okay if you fumble it. It took me a lot of practice to get this too. What we're going to do is we're going to yarn over and then pull through. So what that means is we take the end of the yarn that's attached to our skein and we literally yarn over the hook. Let me hold this a little, this hand here. Normally I wouldn't hold it this way. This is just for demonstration right now so I can make this really, really clear. When we yarn over, we come from behind up over the top of our hook like that. We don't want to come from underneath. That's a different variety of stitches, whole different thing. For crochet in general, unless it otherwise says, we yarn over by coming up over our hook. So if I'm left-handed, I say a few things I can do left-handed, not everything, but if I'm left-handed, that would look like this, would be coming up over the hook, just like that. Same thing, just up and over the hook. Now I need to switch back here to the next skill. Okay, so after we yarn over, then we're going to use the hook portion of our hook, the end here, to grab the yarn that we've yarned over and pull it through the loop that we made. Pull it through that loop that we made when we made our slip knot. So we're just going to pull this up here, let's grab it. You can see it's right in the hook there and pull it right through that loop. And with that, you've made a chain. That's your first crochet stitch right there. That little V you can see of yarn right there, that is one chain. Now, if there's any knitters watching right now, when you're knitting, you know that you count the loops on your knitting needles. With crochet, we don't count the loop that's on the knitting or the crochet hook. Now I'm getting screwed up. We don't count the loop that's on the crochet hook. That is our active loop. We just count the stitches that we've finished, that we've made underneath. So right now we've got one chain, and we can continue to make however many chains we want. We just yarn over. So we pull the yarn over the hook, and you can do that by taking your hand and literally pulling the yarn over the hook, or you can do it by sort of using the hook to grab it. Let me do that again here. I've got a stitch on my hook. And you see how the effect is the same. We just want to yarn over the hook, and then we use that hook to pull that chain right on through. And now, see how those V's sort of nest into each other? Now we have made two chains. So we can just continue going from there. We yarn over and pull the loop through. Yarn over and pull the loop through. Yarn over and pull the loop through. And this is chaining. And you can do this, like I say, for miles and miles and miles. And if we were in person together over a series of weeks, this is probably what I'd have you practice doing for the rest of the night. So if you're at home and you've gotten to this point, this is where you can keep practicing and watch along, because this is sort of the foundation of everything else in crochet. And it is very awkward at first to learn how to hold your hook and learn how to hold the yarn. You can see I use my other hand here to sort of steady my stitches that I've already made as I make new ones. And this part really does take practice. But once you've gotten really comfortable with chaining, everything else really does flow from that. So what can you do with your chains? You can, like I say, chain for miles. Some people like to turn them into little bracelets. Some people like to use them to wrap holiday gifts, save them up for Christmas, make them in all the pretty colors. You know, you can have a lot of fun with them, make garlands, swag, sew them together for different crafts, but really just keep chaining for a really long time. So you can see here is a long series of chains. And we just had a great question. How do you count your chains? Let's come back. And you can see I pulled my hook out of that loop. And if I am not careful, those stitches will come right back out. So I'm going to just very carefully put this up here. And now we can take a look at those chains. Now, do we see the little V's here? We've got that first one right there. There's our slip knot. And there's another V nested into it and another V nested into it above. Each one of those little V's is a chain. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, on and on. We've made all those numbers of chains. So the slip knot itself does not count as a chain, but that first V after the slip knot does. Now, it took me, like I say, a long time of practice to where my chains looked like this. When you first make your first row of chains, it's probably not going to look like this. It may look kind of twisted and confused. You might have kind of trouble finding those V's. That's okay. That's part of the process. So just like our slip knot, we can just pull on that end of the yarn and undo our stitches. And we're going to be doing a lot of that when you learn how to crochet. So I know it can feel really difficult when you've got some chains made, you don't want to let them go, but it's okay. You can pull them out and start again. So we've got our slip knot right there. We've got our loop on our hook. My tail end is facing towards me, so I know I'm ready to start crocheting. And I can yarn over and pull that loop through. So now I've made one chain. You can see the slip knot there with that V right above it. So there's one chain there, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can count as you make them, or you can count as that. Now, that's what the front of the chain looks like. Now I'd like to show you the back of the chain. So this is underneath. We're just gonna get that yarn there out of the way. So from underneath, you'll see it looks a little different. We don't have those V's. Well, we do, but they're on the outside. Instead, we've got this sort of line of lumps. Let me turn it this way. It might be a little bit easier to see from the side. I always sort of liken it to the sort of Loch Ness Monster. The Loch Ness Monster, you see the little humps coming up above the edge of the water? That's what we see at the back of our chain. So our chain has the 2 loops that make the V on top and that little hump underneath. So if we go back, put that hook back in our stitch here, we've got this loop here, which is going to make that little V. Oops, let me see, move it out of the way. You can see how that was going to make that V. And then when we pull this through, it's going to make that little hump there in the back. So as you make your chains, practice your tension, practice holding your hook, and also really try and pay attention to the different parts of the stitch and how they're coming off your hook. And that will help you as well as you learn more skills and as you learn how to read your crochet and sort of recognize the stitches that you've already made. So before we move on to the next thing, which would be a turning chain, are there any questions about chaining?
Martha does have a question, a little bit more generic around just hooks. So it sounds like she has an all plastic hook, but we're wondering, are metal hooks better? Do you have any kind of preferences around the materials?
Well, I think that's a great question, and all hooks are great, and all hooks just suit different people. I do always recommend that you try a few different hooks when you're learning how to crochet. Try a few different manufacturers, try a few different handles. I've got just one other hook over here at my table today. I just cleaned, so of course I don't have any others. But I have this one right here, which is an all metal one. It's, as you can see, quite a bit smaller. So this would be for thinner yarns typically. This one is only 4 millimeters, so half the size of this one, and it's got an all metal handle. So the plastic and all metal ones, I'd say, are the most popular as people learn how to crochet. And then there are some other hooks that you can add on to. This is actually the same type of hook, just but with a bamboo handle. In terms of the actual material of the hook itself, some people have different preferences for different types of yarn. Some people like one type of hook for acrylic and a different type of hook, for instance, for wool. But most of the time that's personal preference. So all the hooks should work with all the yarn. It's just a matter of if you like the way they sort of rub against each other. Wooden hooks, for instance, depending again on manufacturer, can be not as slick as metal. So some people find that a little easier to crochet with because they don't find it as slippery. Others of us who like to crochet a little faster love the slipperiness of the metal. So it really is whatever you've got tonight works great. Just practice with it. And like I say, try some other ones. And lots of people start out with, for instance, these Susan Bates and stick with them their whole lives. So whatever works for your hand is great. If your chain is twisting, you're not doing necessarily anything wrong. It's just that you're just learning to crochet. It happened to me a lot when I was first learning too. Things that can help are trying to sort of, I always swallow sort of, let me try that again. I liken it, I can't say the right word, analogize, that's what I was struggling with. I liken it to baseball, sort of where you choke up on the bat a little bit. As I crochet, I'll use some of the fingers of my non-hook hand to sort of stabilize the chain as I'm crocheting it, as I'm making more chains, I should say. And that seems to help a little bit. Another thing that I know when I was first learning, I would struggle with is anytime I would pull my hook out and put my work back down, sometimes I would put my hook back in the wrong way. I'll show you how to do it the right way here in a minute. But if you put your hook in from the wrong direction, that can create a twist in your chain. But to make sure your hook is always in there the right way, we've got our loop right now. I can go ahead and pull that up a little bit bigger. That's our active loop. When you put your hook into that chain or whatever active loop, wherever you're at in your project, the end that's attached to the skein, when you pull down on that, you want that to be in front of your hook, so facing you. Other than that, genuinely, getting that twist out of your chain is a matter of practice, engage, and just learning how to make those chains really smooth and flow nicely. And then all that said, I've been crocheting for 20 years, and once in a while I'll pick up a yarn and I'll only be half paying attention and I'll make a chain and I'll be all twisted. And I say, what did I do? I don't know. I've just got to pull it out and make it again. But that's why I talk about practicing the chaining. It's very normal, very, very normal at the beginning for it to be twisted. And that is just a matter of practicing those hand movements and getting them really, really nice and smooth, and learning how to hold your hook and your yarn so they're not twisting around on you as you're making those chains. So to keep track of your stitch count when the chain gets long, if you're making something that has a really long beginning chain, I recommend one more crochet tool besides scissors and a hook and all those other things. And I'm trying to, mine are of course buried here. Let me get a couple so I can show you. Here they are. All right, there we go. Some stitch markers. These are stitch markers, and these are crochet stitch markers specifically. And the reason we know that they're for crochet is that they open up like a safety pin. The ones that are made for knitting don't often open up. They might be a solid ring. We don't want to use those for crochet. We need to use the kind that opens. This red one's a little easier here to see on my hand, but we can use these to mark our stitches. So whether they're chains or any other stitch that you'll learn how to make eventually, you can always mark your stitches with these stitch markers. So if you have to make a really long project, you can, put a stitch marker in every 20 chains, every 50 chains, whatever you're comfortable with, every 10. And that will help you then not have to start over and count every time. So a little tip there. Stitch markers are actually really helpful in general as you're learning how to crochet. So I saw a comment, if you don't have stitch markers, you can use paper clips, bobby pins, safety pins, all those things can be really helpful. Even just a little scrap of yarn if you're really in a pinch. I always recommend a contrasting color in that at that point though. Okay. So yes, bobby pins, whatever you've got available, just make sure you can get it back off the yarn. Otherwise it's going to become a permanent part of your project. So once you've got those chains made, then it's time to start crocheting more of our fabric. So that means we're going to be working back into those chains. So lots of different things to talk about here. When you work into the chain, you can work into any part of the chain you want, but you want to be consistent. So once you've got your chains made and you've got them untwisted and you can sort of see that they're all lined up there, you've got some choices. Lots of people like to work under those top two loops. So let me pull up a different hook. That would mean inserting your hook. Sorry, can't quite do that one left-handed. So inserting your hook under the two loops at the top of the chain. There we are. Some people, myself included, most often, I prefer to work under that back hump. So that would mean inserting your hook just right under that little back hump right there. And some people like to just use one of the loops. It doesn't matter, especially as you're learning. It might matter for a particular project, but it doesn't matter in general as long as you try and be consistent. So tonight, if you've made a chain and it's twisted and you just want to go ahead and try the stitches, don't worry too much about what part of the chain you're working into if you're just giving it a try. But once you've got that chain consistent, you do want to try and work consistently into the same part of the chain, at least for that project. Tonight, as we're experimenting, try different parts. It's okay if your swatch and the little thing you make tonight, is a little goofy and twisted. That's fine. We're just learning the stitches. We're not really making any particular thing tonight. So you can experiment with that a little bit as you like. So We know we're going to be working into these chains, but before we work into them, we need to leave a turning chain. So the turning chain is basically a little ladder. When we make the stitches and we work back into this chain, those stitches are going to have some height. So we need to create a little ladder at the beginning of the row to lift us up to that height. Otherwise, when we make our stitches at the beginning of the row, they're going to be all pinched and shortened because I don't have that lift up to start at the right height so that it's a nice even height across the row. So we skip one or more chains at the beginning, the ones closest to the hook, and we call those the turning chains. Now, the first stitch we're going to be learning tonight, well, the next stitch I should say we're going to be learning tonight is the single crochet. So for a single crochet, we usually only skip the chain closest to the hook. We skip one chain. For other stitches, you'll skip different amounts. It depends on the pattern. It depends on the stitch. So for now, though, we're just going to skip one. And what does it mean to skip a stitch? Literally means skip over it, jump right on over it as if it wasn't there. So we've got one stitch there, and we want to start crocheting in the second stitch from the hook right there. And what we're going to be making are single crochets. Single crochets are abbreviated SC for single crochet in patterns. So let's start by working our stitch under those top two loops because that is the most common way. You can see before I was sort of crocheting straight up. Now I'm going to sort of turn my work a little bit here. And again, this is because I'm right-handed. If I was left-handed, I'd be going the other way, but I'm right-handed. So I want to take my hook and I want to leave the active loop on my hook. And I want to insert my hook under those top two loops of the V right there. Not this V. This is our turning chain. We want to come to this one right here. So I'm going to put my hook under those two loops. There we are. We just push it right through. So I've got my active loop, the loop that was already on our hook, and now the two loops of that chain on top of my hook. Now, if I flip my hook over, you can see there's that back hump. That's how I know my hook's in the right spot. So let me pull that out one more time. Get that sort of straightened out again here. There we are. So I've made my chains. I've got my active loop. I've got my turning chain, the one I don't want to work into. So I come to the next one. I insert my hook under those top two loops. And you can use your other hand to sort of push them on there, wiggle them on there. However you can get them on there, it works. I know I'm in the right spot. I can double check. I've got that back hump underneath my hook. So now we go back to the same skills we've already practiced. We yarn over again. We want to yarn over the hook. And we're going to use the end of our hook to pull this strand of yarn, but only through the two loops of that stitch. We don't want to pull it all the way through that active loop. We want to yarn over and grab that yarn, pull it under those two loops. Now I've got two loops on my hook. I have the active loop and the loop I just pulled through the stitch. So now yarn over and pull through those two loops, and we've made one single crochet. You can see how that's got a little bit of height to it. There's our little turning chain or ladder there on the end, and we've made a single crochet. Let's go ahead and pull that out and do it again. Now I want to make sure that I've got my yarn on my hook correctly, that my loop is the right direction. When I pull down on my skein, it moves on the side facing me. So now I see there's a chain right there. That's my turning chain. So I come to the chain beneath it, and I'm going to insert my hook right under those two loops. Just like that. So we've got our active loop, the two loops at the top of that chain, and the back hump of that chain underneath. Then we can yarn over or grab that yarn with our hook, and we're going to pull that loop up through the stitch. Give that a little pull if you need to, get it comfortable on your hook. You've got two loops on your hook, yarn over and pull through, and that's one single crochet. Now I saw a really astute question somebody popped up, and I'm sorry I didn't catch the name. Somebody asked, If you're skipping a chain, won't it be shorter? And yes, that is something. When you go to a written crochet pattern, more often than not, it'll tell you to, for instance, chain, I'm just going to make up some numbers here. If it says chain 5, it'll have you skip the chain closest to the hook. You'll have 4 single crochets back across that chain. So when you're chaining, if you're going to be working single crochets, you need to work 1 extra chain to be the turning chain right there on the end. So let's pull this one back out now and take another look at it. I'm going to pull out that chain because it's getting a little wonky. I'll use this one here. There we are. Doesn't matter which one of these or how many you have. We're just practicing the actual stitches. So I've got my loop on my hook. This right here is my turning chain, and this right here is the stitch I want to work into. Now, what if instead of working under those top 2 loops, it says to work into the back hump? Then we just flip it over and find the hump of that chain. So right there is our V. Let me pull that a little bit closer here. There's our V. And we flip it over. There's the hump right there. So you can instead go under that one. We're essentially going into the exact same spot. It's just how we have our chains focused. Do we have them with the V up, or do we have them with the back hump up? But when you see that back hump on top of our hook, we look underneath. There's those 2 pieces underneath, the 2 loops of the V underneath. So we're still sticking our hook the exact same place. We're always putting our hook in that same spot. It's just a matter of what sort of how we approached our chain. Do we have it right side up or upside down? Like I say, I like doing it this way because when I make these stitches, let's go ahead and make it together. Since I've got just 1 loop from that stitch on top of my hook, I will yarn over and pull through just that one. We still want to land with 2 loops on our hook and yarn over and pull through to finish that single crochet. But what I like is that then at the bottom of my project, I get a really nice looking edge. And again, this is probably a little bit more of a finer point when you get onto crocheting, but I think crocheting into that back hump can be a really good habit to make, to have, because it gives a really nice finished project. So now we've made 1 single crochet. What do? We want to make more single crochets, and we want to keep working across our chain. We don't have to make any more turning chains. We just have the one at the very beginning of the row, the ladder that lifts us up. So now we can just make our single crochets. So now we will find that next stitch. If we were doing it from the top, we would be finding that next V, but since we're doing it from the bottom, we're going to find that next hump. Just go right down the chain and find the next one. Then we insert our hook into that stitch. So now we've got the active loop on our hook, and we've got our chain on our hook as well. We yarn over, pull just through the chain. So now we've got our active loop and the loop we yarned over and pulled through. Then we yarn over again and pull through both of those loops to finish our second single crochet. You can see now how we're creating some fabric right there. So now we can continue right on across our chain. Find the next one, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up your loop, yarn over, and pull through 2. Now this is a great point to bring back in those stitch markers we were talking about. I'm just going to put my hook down somewhere where it's not going to roll away here. Here we are. If you have stitch markers or bobby pins or safety pins or whatever you like to use, this is a great chance. We want to go back and look at that very first single crochet we made. And if we look at the tops of those stitches, there's those V's again, just like we were talking about in our chains. You can see how they sort of nest right into each other. The one at the top of our very first single crochet is a great one to mark with our stitch marker. And I'm just going to put it under both of those loops. This will let me know that this is the first stitch of the round, or excuse me, of the row. And when I come back to make our next row and we work into this row and go this way, I'll know that this is where I stop. And this will help you keep straighter sides so you know that this is your last stitch. Because when you're first learning to crochet, it can be very difficult to see exactly where to stop. And it's very easy to throw an extra stitch in there or to stop too soon. And that's how you get those wavy sides. So the stitch markers can be a really good tool for that. Then you can just continue to work across your chain. And depending on the pattern you're making, you'll have different stitches, you'll have different numbers of stitches, but for now, you can just practice single crocheting, where we insert our hook, yarn over and pull up a loop, get 2 loops there on the hook, yarn over and pull through both loops to finish our single crochet. So because we're getting on time really quickly tonight, I'm going to go ahead and pretend I've gotten to the end of my chain. You can crochet in each one of those chains across right up to that last one. But I'm going to say for the sake of time that I've already gotten there. So now I'm ready to start row 2. So for row 2, to start again with single crochet, I need another turning chain. I need another ladder to lift me up. So I can chain just like I was doing before. Even though we've been doing other stitches, we can go right back to chaining. We just yarn over and pull through. And now we've got a chain right there, right where we need it for our new ladder. So then what we need to do is turn. And you can chain before you turn, or you can turn and then chain. I like to chain and then turn, but everybody does it a little differently. And when we turn our work, we literally want to flip it over so that we can work back into those stitches we've just made. So when you turn your work, you want to be consistent. Now I'm right-handed, so I turn my work like turning the page of a book. If I were left-handed, I would have been crocheting across this way, so then I could basically go backwards in the book. But you just want to flip back and forth like the page of a book every time, so that as long as you keep flipping that same direction, that's another thing that will keep your edges really nice. If you flip back and forth in different directions, you'll have a little twist there along the side as you make your rows. So we've got our turning chain in there. I'm going to turn the page of my book. And now we can work back into the row of single crochets we made for another row of single crochets. So let's take a quick look at the row we just made. At the top of it, you can see we've got those nested V's again, just like we had with our chains, and we can count those the same way too. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 single crochets made. Again, we don't want to count the loop that's on our hook. Or excuse me, I accidentally counted the turning chain. We don't want to count that one either. We just want to count those stitches. So it's a good idea to count them before you make the turning chain. So let's do that together again here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That one right there is the turning chain. It doesn't count as a single crochet. So now we can work into those stitches. To work into the previous row, what I want you to look for is sort of that little cave. Do you see where everything gets really dark? Everything seems to sort of lead to that spot right there. That is the spot that if we insert our hook right there, and then we look at the top of our stitches again, you can see we just got those 2 loops right on top of our hook, and that's what we want. Let me pull that one out of the way here. We've got our turning chain. So we're going to skip over that chain, but we don't need to skip anything else. We want to look for that little dark spot right there. If I really pull the stitch open, we can see daylight through it. That's where we want to insert our hook. You can see I went under those 2 loops at the top of that last stitch we made. Then it's the same thing. We yarn over, pull that loop up through the stitch, then yarn over again, and pull through those 2 loops. And now we've got our first single crochet for row 2. So since it's our first one, this is a great place to put one more stitch marker. If you've got 2 stitch markers and you just mark the first stitch of each row, that will really help you keep your stitches and your rows even so that you have the same number in each row. It's also, however, a really good idea to go back and count every once in a while, especially as you're learning. So to continue on across here for row 2, we've made our first single crochet there. And we just want to come over and look, just go right to the left if you're right-handed, to the right if you're left-handed, and look for that next cave. And if you look too, you can see there's sort of almost like a little line that draws you right on over. And that's where we want to put our hook for our next stitch. We can double check. There are just 2 loops on top of our hook. That means we're in the right spot. So now we can yarn over, pull that loop up through the stitch, and yarn over and pull through those 2 loops to finish our single crochet. And then we just continue that right on across. Find that next little spot, insert the hook, yarn over and pull up our loop, yarn over and pull through 2, and then come over and just follow that row right on over. If you look at the top, you can see we went under those 2 stitches. Now we've got another V right there. We just want to go right under that V. And yarn over and pull up our loop, and yarn over and pull through 2. So were there any questions I could answer on the single crochet while I've got kind of one set up here on the hook?
Tamara, you might have covered this a little bit, but Dee is just wondering if it makes a difference if you make your turning chain before or after the turn.
It does not, as far as I can tell. For me, I just find it more comfortable to make the turning chain and then turn, because then otherwise you kind of have to hold it in its turned place while you're making those chains. I like to just sort of make them at the end of the row and then turn. It's just easier for me, but I think everybody probably does that one a little bit differently. So whatever's most comfortable for you.
Gotcha.
Okay. So then we've got just a couple more stitches here in row 1. So let's go ahead and finish that off. I'm going to follow that row right on over, and let's pull that really close here. You can see that stitch was worked into that spot, and we want to just follow that right on over that next little cave right there. Then we insert our hook, and it's always sort of going away from us. You can see the hook. I'm over here. You guys are over there. So I'm over here. This hook's going away from me through the fabric of the yarn here. Pull up our loop. See, there's that little spot right there. We yarn over and pull through those 2 loops. Now I know I'm in my last stitch here because I've got my stitch marker there, so that's really handy. And so it's a little easier to see exactly where that row ends, and you won't get as mixed up with your turning chain. So then we just go right into that last stitch. There we are. And yarn over and pull up our loop, and yarn over and pull through 2. So now I don't need that stitch marker anymore. This is where it's great, opens right up, and I can pull it right out and set it aside and use it to mark the first stitch of our 3rd row. So we're running out of time, and there's a couple more things I want to cover today. So I'm going to go through them a little bit quickly, but as we said at the beginning, this is being recorded, so you'll be able to go back and reference this as needed. I showed you the abbreviation for chain, CH, and I talked a little bit about this one. SC is the abbreviation for single crochet, and DC is double crochet. That's our next most popular stitch, if you will. So for a double crochet, for our turning chain, our little ladder, we need to chain 3. So I'm going to do it before I turn, but I'm just going to go ahead and yarn over and pull that through for 1, 2, 3 chains. Now, when we made our turning chain for our single crochet, it didn't count as a stitch. It was just a turning chain, just a little ladder hanging out there on the side. But a turning chain of 3, because it is so big, does count as our first stitch usually. So we're going to say this is our first double crochet of the row, even though it's just a chain of 3. What that means is that that little cave right there that we normally go into for our very first stitch, that's considered already done because we've got this chain of 3. So when we're making double crochets, it can be a little confusing. If you've got a chain of 3 that counts as your first double crochet, we're not going to work into that first stitch because this is our first stitch. So instead, we're going to come over to the next stitch. So that's where we're going to be going for our second double crochet, our first real double crochet, when we make those. To make the double crochet, again, all things we've been doing so far, but we're going to add one more step. Now, before we insert our hook in that stitch, we're going to put a yarn over on it and sort of hold that yarn over on the hook there with your non-hook hand. And this can be a little fiddly, so take your time with it. Then find that second stitch right there. Go ahead and insert your hook in that stitch. And you'll see how I'm sort of holding the yarn behind the fabric here and up out of the way. Let me pull that back out of the way again. I've got my yarn over on my hook, and now I'm holding the yarn in back out of the way a little bit. This keeps it out of my way as I go into that stitch. And now it's in the right spot for me to yarn over and pull through my loop. And now, when I pulled that loop up through the stitch, you can see we've got our active loop, we have that yarn over we made, and we have the loop we pulled up through the stitch. So now we've got 3 loops on our hook. So to finish our double crochet, we yarn over again, pull through just those first 2 loops. That leaves us with 2 loops on our hook. Yarn over again, and pull through those 2 loops. And now we've made a double crochet. So let's make another one. We yarn over, come right over to that next stitch. No difference there. When we're working into our row, it doesn't matter what stitch we're making. We just go right to that next stitch. Insert our hook, yarn over and pull that loop just through the stitch. So we have 3 loops on our hook. Yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. So that is how you double crochet, and then you can continue those for whatever you want to make. So if you are marking your stitches, that stitch marker seems to have wandered off on me here, but if you do want to mark your stitches, you would go ahead and mark the top of that chain 3. So that 3rd chain that you made, like that, and that becomes the top of that first double crochet. So when you have finished crocheting and you want to secure your yarn, we've talked about if you pull back on that yarn, your stitches are just going to disappear. Well, we don't want everything to disappear. So let's say we're done. Best way to secure your yarn is simply to cut it off. Oops, not throw it across the room, cut it off. There we are. And then when you've made that last stitch and you've cut your yarn, you can just pull that yarn end right through that last stitch. So whether it's a chain or a double crochet or a single crochet, as you can see here, that secures it. Now your work won't come undone anymore. So to finish it off from there, you'll need one more tool. Let me pull up my little bag of tricks here, and that is a yarn needle. So one last thing to invest in for crochet is a yarn needle, and it's just like a sewing needle, but you can see it's got a much bigger head in it here, and that's what we need to be able to get yarn through it. So when you've got all your crocheting done, you'll take the end of your yarn. You'll want to do this for both ends, the beginning end and the last end, the cut end at the end of the yarn, the end at the end, and basically get it on your yarn needle. Now, the yarn needles do come in different sizes, and this yarn is a little bit thicker, so I have to squeeze it through there a little bit. But once you've got it on your yarn needle, then you just take your needle and you will weave that through your stitches. So it's a little hard to show because I'm telling you to do it on the inside, but basically you want to just stick your yarn needle into those stitches a little bit. So you can see how I'm sort of burying it in there. You can sort of see hints of it in there. There's a little bit on the back. Well, not even much showing on the back at all. That's good. We want that yarn needle to be buried in there really well. So then you can just pull that end of the yarn right through your project. And this is a little wonky. This isn't, a real project here. It'd be a little neater on something where I'd finished off some stitching. But you just pull right up there to where you've got all that end through. And then I want you to make sure to come back the other direction. Make sure you go back the opposite direction. And you can go ahead and split your yarn if it's that kind of yarn that you can split a little bit with your needle too. But go back that other direction, and that will go a long way to locking in those stitches. Because there's nothing worse than spending your time and learning all these skills to make a beautiful project, and then you throw it in the wash, and it all comes undone. So you always want to make sure to just secure your ends really well. Once you've got that woven around and you feel like that's not going anywhere and it's nice and secure, then of course you can take your scissors and very carefully cut off that end. So if you put just a little bit of tension on it before you snip it, and then give your fabric a little wiggle, that end just disappears right into your fabric. So I know we're officially out of time, but were there any last minute questions I could answer tonight?
I think we're good, yeah.
Okay, great. Well, then we'll go ahead and come back to the other camera. Thank you all so much for joining me tonight. I know we went through a lot of stuff, but like I say, if this is a new skill for you, take your time with those first couple things, really get comfortable with those chains, and then you can come back to this video and learn the rest. And then hopefully I'll see you on Moogly Blog and on Yarn Inspirations and on Michael's, making all the really wonderful projects you can make with crochet. So thank you so much for joining me tonight, everybody.